Okay, and we are live. So welcome to the launch of The World is Our Anchor by Emma Wynn. And Emma will be joined by Janan, Alexandra. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder, along with my partner, Donnie Jochum, of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is the space you find yourselves in right now. The Bureau, the short explanation for our lengthy name is that we are a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And this is the service that we provide. It's holding this room for queer culture. We have been around since 2012. We've been here at the center since 2014. Thanks to the center, thanks to volunteers who keep this project going, and to people like you who show up to events and buy books and all that good stuff. So thank you. Before I introduce our readers, we are an all-volunteer organization, as I mentioned. So we do have a suggested donation of $10. If you're able to give something, great. If not, no worries. And if you'd rather spend your money on books, that's a great way to support us as well. But I'll pass this around and there's change in here. You can also donate on Venmo at BGSQD. For those of you online, it's at BGSQD. Those letters you see on every box in this room. All right, so I'll pass that around. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room. Or if you're watching online, you can go to bgsqd.com and sign up there, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our many upcoming events. And before I introduce our readers, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We are actively seeking to partner with and provide material support to a local queer Indigenous organization. We hope to make an announcement about this partnership in the near future, but in the meantime, we encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. All right. So Janan Alexandra was born in Nicosia, Cyprus, to a Lebanese mother and an American father. She received her MFA in poetry from Indiana University. A 2021-2022 Creative Research Fulbright Scholar, Janan currently teaches English at the Hotchkiss School in Connecticut. You can find her work in Gulf Coast, Plowshares, Mizna, Muzzle, the Adwat Journal, and elsewhere. Please welcome Janan.
Check, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna set up my little podium here. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Greg and Donnie, for having us here today. And extra special thanks to you, Emma, for inviting me to read with you today. I feel honored to open as we celebrate Emma's book. And what else did I want to say? Thank you all for coming out in the rain. I wish I had a rain poem to start off with, but I'll just, show you my legs. It's a rain poem. I want to begin today. I was thinking, as Greg was talking about how the Bureau kind of invites us to think about a utopia and to create a space in advance of the arrival of that utopia, right? To create a space that meets a need where a need might not otherwise be met. And I think that that's a lot of what poetry is also. So thank you so much for making this space and in that way, helping to bring the utopia forth. And I want to start with this poem by my really dear mentor and friend, the poet and essayist Ross Gay. Does anyone here get the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day? Comes every morning to your inbox at 6 a.m. And I'll tell you, it's one email that won't stress you out. And this was the poem a day just a couple days ago. And I think it also reminds us of the utopias around us. It's called Throwing Children. It is really something when a kid who has a hard time becomes a kid who's having a good time, in no small part thanks to you throwing that kid in the air again and again on a mile-long walk home from the Indian joint as her mom looks sideways at you like, you don't need to keep doing this because you're pouring with sweat and breathing a little bit, now you're getting a good workout. But because the kid laughs like a horse up there, laughs like a kangaroo, beating her wings against the light, because she laughs like a happy little kid, and when coming down and grabbing your forearm to brace yourself for the time when you will drop her, which you don't, and slides her hand into yours as she says for the 40th time, the 50th time, inexhaustible, her delight, again, 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 and again. And you say, give me till the redbud tree, or give me till the persimmon tree, because she knows the trees. And so quiet, you almost can't hear through her giggles. She says, okay, till the next tree. When she explodes, howling, yanking your arm from the socket, again, again, all the wolves and mourning doves flying from her tiny throat, and you throw her so high. She lives up there in the tree for a minute. She notices the ants organizing on the bark and a bumblebee carousing the little unripe persimmon in its beret. She laughs and laughs as she hovers up there like a bumblebee, like a hummingbird up there, giggling in the light, like a giddy little girl up there the world knows how to love. Again, that was Throwing Children by Ross Gay. I can't take credit for that poem. So I'm going to read a little smattering of work today. I'm going to start with kind of the opening sequence of my current manuscript, reading a few pages of those poems, which I think are all sort of in conversation. A lot of what I think about in my work, as you might have gleaned in the bio that Greg shared, kind of comes back to identity, questions of belonging and home, being part of the Lebanese diaspora, having grown up in different parts of the world, coming up in a family where there was a lot of Arab culture, there was Arabic around me, but I was never taught to speak Arabic, has informed my work a lot. Particularly because language is our medium as writers and poets. So those are some of the things that this opening sequence is dealing with. Invocation. I call my mother to ask her the word, knowing there's no English for this which has a name in Arabic. Among all she did and didn't teach us, we learned to scour dishes with cold water and coffee grounds, trick for losing the stink left by a broken yolk. I ask for this word I've forgotten, to carry its flap in my mouth, small utterance of a loss I practice and repeat, hope to repair. Tell me, when I can no longer call, what else will have no name? Also, you can make sounds if you want after, but don't feel like you have to. Apparently in classical music, I'm learning, everyone holds their applause till the end. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever you want. You can snap, you can holler, you can, clap if you want, but no pressure. That poem, just for what it's worth, the word in question that I'm referring to is a word in Arabic, which is zankha, which refers to this sort of like rotten, putrid smell that's left on dishware, if you eat eggs or poultry. And so we wash our, after you have your breakfast, you wash your dishes with coffee grounds before hot water and soap, which takes the smell out. And that was the word that this poem is talking about. Heritage. When we came to America, she kept records, an archive locked in her jewelry box, baby teeth, a clutch of hair fastened, wrapped in paper around a silence, the small sukoon our lips made, little roundness hanging circles in the air, keyhole, doorway, a shapely absence we peered through. This next poem is a little bit on the longer side. It's written in 5 sections, and it's called Origin Story. 6, maybe it's more than 5 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Origin story. I only tell you that so that you kind of can manage your expectations. When is it gonna end? Origin story. We are whirling through Beirut, the city I visit most often in my sleep. I take this to mean I am making my best effort to dream in Arabic, where the air is rich in orange flowers and thyme, and we draw back our lips to speak. 2. In the so-called city that never sleeps, I tightrope along the edge of cobblestones, bathed in light and last week's trash. I dream by nose the heavy stench of garbage rotting into the sweet, fresh cack, golden purses who ride the air like wooden boats. In my ear, a moped twists and guzzles the pitted road, spitting gravel under the too slow heel of somebody's foot. 3. Somebody's foot grazes mine, and I find a boy there, gazing in at me through the small eye hole of my sleep. I have forgotten his name until my mother reminds me. It's Hanny, there in a teal t-shirt, black irises flowering from his eyes. One summer afternoon with Hanny, we swam and played, licking ice pops, sticky-lipped on the stone apartment steps, our knees slapping open to greet the turquoise sea. We floated weightless, our bodies fanning starfish. Later that day, I learned my first lesson on the dangers of touch and electricity in Beirut. Though I had been warned, I yanked open the refrigerator door, a sudden shock of light jolting my arm from inside, a blade zigzagging hot through my bones. 4. When asked about his time in Beirut, Mahmoud Darwish said, poetry requires a stable temperature, around 20 degrees Celsius. Ice and very hot weather kill poetry, and Beirut was boiling with feelings and visions. Beirut was a land of perplexity. 5. Dear land of perplexity, I think I understand what the poet means. Everyone always clicks their teeth soberly and says, the situation is very bad. And in the same breath, a phoenix appears in love with living, who for the sake of a new beginning will burn himself alive. 6. Dear secret stairways painted brightly, sing-song greetings I know and do not know. Dear orange juice held in squat paper pouches, sleeves of Nescafe. Dear mushroom shop, candy stall, your lengths and ribbons of sweets, unrolling like the tongue's lottery tickets, dotted with pink and blue treats. I sling my arm around your balconies at night, catch myself falling through the house with windows blown out, face agape. 7. As the story goes, we once lived in a beige house. 2 parents, 2 sisters, 1 black cat, 2 turtles who left and never came back. I've never read the next poem aloud at a reading. And just the other day, like 2 days ago, I realized that it's not actually written after the poet who I thought it was written after. It's called Why We Must Speak, and I encountered a poem called Why We Must Struggle while I was a graduate student. Somebody shared it with me and attributed it to Naomi Shihab Nye, who's a wonderful Palestinian-American poet. And so for the last like 3 years or whatever, I've been like, Why We Must Speak after Naomi Shihab Nye. It's not after her. Apparently someone named Kay Ryan wrote Why We Must Struggle. It's a beautiful poem and it's on the Poetry Foundation website. But I just feel like I had to say that, and also I'm excited to read this aloud for the first time. Why we must speak. If we do not speak in the night, in the kitchen, here leaning over the starry counter like two hunched sunflowers, if we do not stand stooped like this, picking at cold lasagna, which is neither the food of your country nor my own, how will we carry the tin pail, sloshing with the question, can you imagine walking into a softly lit room in the world and feeling, here I am, home with all of you? To be known in the arithmetic of belonging, we follow an order of operations. We do the math, enough and not enough. What are you, really, really, from? Really, we are the field in each other's eyes. We hope to die surrounded by our languages, even those we cannot speak. All right, I'm going to shift gears and read a couple of newer poems. Did anyone happen to look at the clock when I came up here? Because I didn't. I brought it with me, but I didn't. So I'm trying to manage my time. Okay, this poem is called Free Dates. Down the road, there's a stretch of sidewalk covered in dates, sunlight drizzled like honey around clusters of warm and wrinkled fruit. Have you ever seen a date, really studied one? Be honest, we called them cockroaches when we were kids, fools, ashamed of the absence of Oreos and Twizzlers or whatever else the mostly American kids around us washed down with Capri Sun after school. Let me explain. The date is chewy with decay and the nutty sweet of cooked sugar. The date is like God's toffee, God's grandmother's homemade caramel. You can tell, I am reformed, returned. Assimilation can last only so long before we become our mothers and claw our way back to the homeland, which exists mostly on our tongues at this point, because mostly the homeland is rubbled or razed to the ground. But hey, here it is now, as my tongue swims around the pit of this date. I can't believe my luck. Free dates. Have you ever tried to buy them at your local co-op? $9.99 for a box of how many? As I gather what I can carry in my hands, the neighborhood rooster wails his small and repetitive poem, don't we all? It is day, it is day, and the call to prayer rings out over the dusty mountains. I think of my mother opening the sky blue doors of the Namliye, her fingers deep in quart jars packed with dried figs, dates, almonds, and walnuts. In our part of the world, she would say, this is dessert. Part of the world where I stand now, a little alone, a stranger a little less. Most of my poems are about my mom. What else is new? So yeah, that poem, there was a date poem nearby and I harvested the dates. And this next poem comes from the same time period in my life, during which I was living on a small island, Cyprus, where Actually, the population of cats eclipses the population of humans. So I wrote a lot of cat poems. This is called Just Had to Tell Somebody. Just had to tell somebody, the sun's come around and the people of the sun too, pouring into the starched streets like a procession of tambourines. Just thought you'd want to know. I roll heel to toe through the old city, alhamdulillah springing from my tongue like gladness. I'm toothy as the boy blowing bubbles into the sea, one oblong globe after another, wobbling like foals from the O of his lips. Praise be to both what is born and vanishes mid-air, atom to atom. For the first time since we buried you in the red earth, I turn up my sleeves, unlatch the shutters like I'm undressing the house. It's true that after you died, I became forgetful of the body in my sorrow, or the sorrow in my body, neglected to stroke the underarm's corn silk, failed to notice the trail of thistles sprouting along my inner thigh. What's that? Bare ankles and knees? Are you kidding? All on strike. But today, even the stones oil their faces to gleaming. Just had to say, miss you, think of you. The alley cats are pregnant again, lined up like gods on the high garden walls. Their eyes sun clean and sealed while they wait for what lives. I think I'm going to read 2 more poems. How does that sound? Let's see. This is a newer poem. I started a full-time teaching job this year, and that has had disastrous effects on my writing life, but I'm figuring it out. This is called Elegy for This Week's Roadkill. And forgive me in advance, there's a small moment where I make a very small gesture toward New Yorkers. Elegy for This Week's Roadkill. Blue fog rises off the earth's back and daylight filters through the curtains. How delicate the earliness, where time pools in liquid form along the needle-full pine, earth and time made of remembering, of tree rot and water. How gleaming the grave, how tea-dark the soil, now sharp with frost, now warm as the blood of animals, among which I include myself, and the glorious bowels, the perfect clay of deer scat left in shapely piles. Have you stopped to consider the beautiful ornamental centerpieces at your feet? Geometries of shit punctuating the leaf litter with the elegance of almonds. I remember to step over the droppings, do my best to avoid frightening a fawn and her mother, skittish as the rest of us. That night driving home, their cousin, the quick red fox, leapt so expertly across the road, I doubt if the paws ever touched ground at all. The clever pup flashed before me, a flight of eyes, bright and fleeting as a match, and so struck by my headlights, I held for a moment the pup's heartbeat in the cupped palm of my mind. And then it was over. Foxtail, a final outstretched gesture, vanished through the hedge to safety. It will come as no surprise that I drive slowly to the great displeasure of many New Yorkers behind me, because I'm afraid to end or injure any life, though I do so daily, I know, holding memorials for carpenter ants, ladybugs, spiders, and the one house finch whistle killed in October, lighter than a mushroom and buried in a small cardboard box behind the sprawling oak. I suck my teeth and swerve to avoid maiming those beings whose bodies have already been pressed into asphalt, what my first teacher in America would have called a blueberry pancake. But then this is more or less 4 billion years of history, the ground a grave, the grave a mouth, the mouth grown wild with edible gardens. Now eat. Here's my elegy with clotted fur. Oh, possum guts, Who did you love way down in your spleen? Oh, groundhog and coyote of the underbite, paw pads up. What did you last taste, touch, smell? Oh, skunk of glory, we are responsible for the suffering of your mother. And each time I drift past the buck collapsed on the side of 44, I twist to face him once more, my eyes searching for what lives in his, our gazes braided with dead grass, my mouth shrugging open as if to absorb the leak of blood that lines the edges of his lips. My brother, with whom did you roam the meadow? Who calls for you now between snow-laced fields, the ground engraved with remembering your hooves' rhythm and gait, steam rising off the earth's back, a gesture, an impression, buck slumped upon the earth's shoulder. Okay, this is a pandemic poem, which, you know, I was poetry editor at Indiana Review when COVID started, and we got a lot of COVID poems and COVID stories, and I think that's really important. It's a really important source of processing and space to kind of think about and find language for what we collectively experienced and continue to experience. But this long preface is just to say I haven't actually read this poem aloud either at a reading, so testing it out, and hopefully it's not just a COVID cliche. This is called I Am Here As You Are There Somewhere, although the other title in my head for it is Notes on Touch. We'll find it. I am here as you are there somewhere. Sure, life also includes staring at ice flakes in thawing compost, sweeping debris. When I push the broom across the floor, dust springs alive. I am here as you are there somewhere. Together, we miss the touch of the world, beautiful and awful. But still, the birds aren't closed today. The birds don't stop their happy racket. This robin just flopped down in the grass by me. When I speak, her head twitches. I wish she would climb into my hand. I wish it silently in my heart. It is invisible, but near constant, the urge to touch, to make and learn by feel, to be known by feel. What else is there? Some want sex twice a day, and others have lost all desire. Regardless, the walk across the yard is still the walk across the yard. Everything keeps on, lives and squeaks. I scrub the mudroom and find moss dotting the stone steps like stubble. I love it as I love every face as a face I might press my cheek to. Thank you.
Thank you, Tana. Emma Wynn received their MTS from Harvard Divinity School and teaches philosophy, religious studies, psychology, and LGBTQI+ US history at the Hotchkiss School in Connecticut. They have been published in a variety of online and print journals and nominated for a Pushcart Prize twice. Their first book, The World is Our Anchor, was published in February by Future Cycle Press. Please welcome Emma Wynn.
I will probably sit because I'm very tall for all things. Thank you for having us again, just echoing all of Janan's many thanks. And also a huge thank you to Janan for coming to read with me. I read all your poems that are online that I could find. And it's just so much different to hear people read their work and just such a joy. And the best part, one of the best parts about having my book published is that I've gotten to do a lot of readings with other poets. And so I've gotten to go to a lot of readings and listen to a lot of poets read. And it's been so wonderful. And I've been drawing so much joy and energy from it. So the first poem I'd like to read is called Muscled. Can you hear me okay? Is the line?
Yeah.
I'd never eaten them, she said, mussels, but the stew called for whole valves, flaking black chips. I know it wasn't the reason vertigo pinned me flat all night, vomiting even water. It was the movement of the whole world, or else the world was still, and I was whirling spheres out of tune. But I felt somewhere those clots of muscle, folded again in wet darkness, making a home of me. Inconstant, salty, dark substrate on which strange shells cling and flower. This next poem is called What I Learned from Fairy Tales. When I was young, I was homeschooled and I spent a lot of time in the local library, and they had all of the volumes of the fairy books, the red fairy book, the yellow fairy book, the pink. I don't know if other people also read those. It's really the same story over and over and over again. But I loved them and I read them all many, many times. But growing up, I thought a lot about the messages of fairy tales and what it meant that a person like me liked those stories. And so this poem is called What I Learned from Fairy Tales. It is darkness, all the stories say, that is the enemy, and pockmarked faces, still living after disease, vicious for their scars. To have only the eyes white in a face of earth, to stoop and drag a limb, or lean, wrinkled and worn, is to hide a cloven hoof. The oldest lie, that you can tell a witch by her Jew's nose and a saint by her snow white skin, and one's nearly as old. A virtuous mouth spills golden coins. There are iron shoes to burn the brutal mother. The beautiful can escape fathers with wandering hands and merry princes. You can live in glass castles, eating nothing but golden apples, while the sun glares everywhere, hard and white. I grew up in really rural Pennsylvania, and there wasn't really very much to do there, but a thing that kids liked to do was drive their cars really fast along the roads and take baseball bats and knock people's mailboxes off their posts. So this is something that happened to our mailbox a lot and just made my father just rabid with rage. And so this is a poem about that. It's called Delinquent. The teenagers play redneck games all summer, open door Jeeps and the tinny smack of baseball bats on mailboxes, all up and down the back roads, which is where we live. Nothing but back roads, lined with brush and blackbirds. When father comes up the hill with our mailbox, still shoulders booming rage, my sisters dash to bolt holes or freeze like rabbits, and I'm left to pass the tools he needs to beat the box back whole. Sweat itching, like the ache in my gut to burn, to wind up bursting with the bile of obedience and let the black boxes fly free in the blazing nights. There are so many ways to live, but not one of them is forever. So I'm a history teacher, and I am lucky enough to teach LGBT US history, and I've been doing that for the past 10 years. And so there's a small section in the middle of my book that are poems that come out of having done a lot of research about figures in the past who probably today would be some kind of LGBTQI, but at the time were, either closeted, hidden, confused, in agony. And so I took the research on a number of those figures and turned them into some poems where I really tried to imagine what they could say if they had been able to speak, if they'd been able to say more than they were able to say. And I want to read one of them. It's about Joshua Fry Speed and Abraham Lincoln. So I'll just read the little bit at the beginning because it gives you a little bit about their lives, and then I'll read the poem. So Joshua Fry Speed and the young lawyer Abraham Lincoln shared rooms and a bed above Speed's store in Springfield, Illinois from 1837 to 1841. In 1840, Speed's father died, and Joshua began making plans to return to Kentucky to take care of the family's plantation, Farmington. And as the date of his departure approached, Lincoln broke off his engagement to marry Todd and fell into a deep depression. Joshua wrote to a friend that Lincoln, quote, went crazy. I had to remove razors from his room, take away all knives and other such dangerous things. It was terrible. When Joshua left, Lincoln wrote to his law partner and friend, quote, whether I shall ever be better, I cannot tell. I awfully forebode I shall not. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die, or be better, it appears to me. Within a year of those letters, both Lincoln and Speed were married to women. So in this poem, lines 1, 5, 6, 10, and 18 all contain excerpts from letters that Lincoln wrote to Speed after they were married. So some of this language is in fact their own. And I wrote this, I write all free verse, but this one I actually wrote in a form because I thought that it would work very well to express the extent to which they were contained by form, and that there was so much that they couldn't say to each other. So you'll notice that it's a sestina, and I won't explain what that is, but you'll notice that there's some repeated words that just keep coming back, and that's because of the constraint of this form. And the first line of this is from a letter that Lincoln wrote to Speed when Speed was married, and Speed wrote him and said, I don't know if I can do this. And this is what Lincoln wrote to him. Love, very shortly you will again feel well. You and I were strangers once, so might her face grow sweet. No, the heart can fall again that fell. Our ends are lives, the normal hearth. You can tell the bargain bad. Hug it all the tighter, love. Very shortly, you will again feel well. Now forget our little rooms. Our bed we'll sell and put away with childish things. Lighter leave as men from boys to duty hereto fell. For there's nothing but what earth can realize, hell nor heaven, toilless fields nor bachelor nights forever bright, but youthful dreams that die as well in Kentucky dust as anywhere I dwell. The frontier ends, dear. All have their plight or yoke no day will lift, God-given. Our house fell. Forget the steamboat to St. Louis, don't tell. Our slender bunk, let memory grow slighter. Love, very shortly you will again feel well. Green hearts fade, must age and turn, in falling fell. I'd like to read a poem about bees. I really like to watch bees. I admire much about them, and I'm just very interested by them. Near us, there's an Audubon Society that has a indoor hive that has like a plexiglass panel on one side of it. And when my oldest son was young, we would take him there. And we would watch the bees come in and out of tube and then work in their hive behind the plexiglass panel. And I don't know why, but I could do that for a very long time. So this poem is called What the Bees Know. I think it must be very ordinary how the dawn bees nuzzle the nectaries of the raspberries, unrolling their soft tongues and rooting them wearily in the work of the day. Again and again, the burrowed sips, thorax muscles burning, widening the wings' arcs, nectar sacs swollen with boredom and sugar, dragging their way home. And also ordinary, the days when it's all sweetness at the mouths of the flowers, and sweeter still coming home. The brush of antennae curving slightly to cup another's scent, mandibles gentle on the sides of the face, nectar thickening as they tremble mouth to mouth. What the bees know, distilling honey from each other's bright, tired mouths in the ordinary days. That is in fact how bees make honey. They pass it from each other, from one bee to the next, mouth to mouth to mouth to mouth, and then it ends up in the little place where they store the honey. So that's actually part of if you eat honey, it's actually been passed from B to B by kissing. When I was doing some research for some of my historical poems, I read quite a bit about the Perkins School for the Blind. The director of the school for a time was the lover, probably, I'm guessing, of Charles Sumner, who everybody knows from their history book. He's the guy who got caned on the Senate floor for opposing slavery. And I read a lot about the Perkins School for the Blind, and in many ways it was really incredible place. But one of the things I read that I did not like and was quite just taken with was just how much surveillance they did on the girls. They really wanted to make them model blind people so that people would see what great work they were doing and how wonderful they were. And so one of the things they did was anytime they caught them masturbating, they would hit them with rulers. And as you can imagine, they're blind, so they would frequently sneak up on them in private moments. And I thought to myself, gosh, no privacy, right? And it made me think a lot about how we try to police girls and women's bodies and their pleasure and their happiness in their bodies. And so I wrote this poem about that. It's called "There Are No Words for What We Do." At Perkins School for the Blind, teachers slapped with rulers, the girl rocking gently with a secret smile, one heel tucked up under her skirts. There's always someone ready to spoil a girl's fun. Sad Jesus with a lamb, Sylvester Graham and his bread of abstention crumbling to dust on the tongue. So we learn to grow so small, under a blanket in the back seat, sunlight awash through closed lids, trickles of knee pit sweat sticking to leather, the last puzzle piece slotted in at last. All the strays are coming home. God's city, coming slowly out of the clouds like a silver ship. The day's film rewinding, a cup shattering itself whole. Just a girl's body, humming a brighter chord down the bones. Actually, is a real thing. One of the things we study in my LGBT history class is sex ed in the 1800s. And there's a fantastic pamphlet by the Reverend Fulgence Meyer that is all about, how you mustn't ever touch yourself or do anything, young ladies. And the best part about it is that there's in the inside cover, there's a picture of a very sad Jesus. And the book tells you that if you're feeling urges that you should not be feeling, you just look at the sad Jesus and it will inspire you to not do those things because you realize how sad you've made them. And Sylvester Graham has an incredible book from the 1800s for boys about how to remain, continent and all these things. So if you want to go down a great historical rabbit hole, I can send you a PDF of the Reverend Fulgence Meyer's Helps to Purity with the sad Jesus. I want to read this poem. It's about two of my friends named Megan and Sophie. Megan and Sophie are in a jail, in a prison in San Diego, California. And they're transgender women and they're incarcerated in a men's facility. California actually has some of the most progressive regulations in the country for trans prisoners. So they could be transferred to a women's prison if they wanted to, but they have not requested that because they would be separated. And so they're staying where they are. Actually, Megan she could have her sentence commuted by some of the recent laws in California that have said that they will shorten the sentences of nonviolent drug offenders, but she doesn't want to have her sentence shortened. She's trying to work against it because then she would leave Sophie alone. So this is called On C Block, and it's for my friends Megan and Sophie. In the men's prison, San Diego, Megan and Sophie tell me they love to feed the sparrows and the brown rabbits that huddle low in the grass. If they sit so still, their own bodies forget them. A rabbit brushes by like a sigh. Sometimes Sophie runs and runs miles around the track in her taped up shoes, watching the birds skip the fence and dart for the mountains. At night, they open their tray slots and reach out their arms. Their fingers, dark with dirt, can just touch. I want to read this poem. It's very much about the legacy of war for men and fathering. It's about my father who struggled struggled in his relationship with his father, and just that passing down through the generations, that inability to feel, inability to come to terms with feeling, that I think a lot of men have and don't know how to talk about and don't talk about, and then they become this sort of ticking time bomb for the people around them. So this is about my dad and his dad. His dad was a foot soldier in World War II, a Jewish foot soldier in World War II, and liberated Western Europe. And one of the things that he brought home with him was a huge Nazi flag that my dad had in a trunk in our house, and would take out sometimes and sort of joke about my granddad in the war. And it was the kind of joking where you could tell it wasn't funny. So I wrote this poem after hearing my dad's stories about my granddad's experiences in the war. It's called Homecoming. All through France and later Germany, when his unit settled for the night in copses, barns, townhouses with bombed off faces, tents in mud, my grandfather readied himself to survive, as for prayer. First, he'd find a piano, buy time with an egg, then wash his socks and hang them to dry before morning. All around him, foot rot, and privates drinking kerosene, swaying to their own shattered music. So he came home unbroken, contraband Nazi banner ripped from a pole, smuggled home in spare trousers, married glamorous Goyim women, tucked a baby grand under a velvet quilt at night, bought a silver cater for the synagogue, furs and theater tickets, pickled tomatoes and sandwiches fisted full of brisket, demanded burnt toast in diners, kept a beautiful beard and 4 children, a Cadillac. Remember, my dad laughs, when he came home to leave groceries at the door, you could just wave goodbye to him going down the stairwell if you ran. My aunt puts her hand over his. In her house, last year's Christmas tree still hangs with glass glitter and brittle brown arms, one slip from going up in flames. It's 1996. Clinton launches cruise missiles on Iraq. Grandfather bleeds out in Beth Israel. It's late. And Dad's car tears out, the red wash of headlights on my bedroom wall shrinking into the night. We sleep easy as soldiers until it's almost a relief to hear the bombs begin to whistle their way home. I'd like to read one slightly longer. It's the 3 parts of the historical poems, and then close with the short poem. So this historical poem is in 3 parts, one in the voice of Charles Sumner, one in the voice of Samuel Gridley Howe, and one in the voice of Julia Ward Howe, who is Samuel Gridley Howe's wife. And Julia Ward Howe is most known to people for writing Battle Hymn of the Republic. So in 1857, the famed abolitionist Charles Sumner sailed for Europe to recover from the brutal beating he received on the Senate floor at the hand of Preston Brooks. And I don't know about you guys, I remember that picture from my US history textbook. Yeah, we all had it, right? He left behind his dear friend, Samuel Gridley Howe, founder of the Perkins School for the Blind, fellow abolitionist, and crusader for prison and school reform. Despite Samuel's dedication to multiple progressive causes, he expected his wife, Julia Ward Howe, to be a housewife, and he opposed her career as a poet, author, and public intellectual. She actually had to wait until he died to write Battle Hymn of the Republic, for which she surpassed him in fame. So multiple lines from these poems are taken from the letters, papers, and published works of Sumner, Gridley Howe, and Julia. So the first one is Letter from Charles Sumner to Samuel Gridley Howe, unsent. Shipboard en route to Paris, 1857. I will never send this letter because I know your feelings. The spasming sea flashes light in telegraphic stutters that batter my words back at me, a Morse code spelling traitor. There has been between us an unspoken agreement to lie, but the inborn invincible sentiments of my human heart Nature in all her subtle forces is marshaled against us, and I am not strong enough not to wish you loved me with your body as well as your mind. My broken head still bears the mark of Brooke's cane, and I wish you were here to gentle it, beside me in my narrow bed when I wake thrashing, again ripping the desk from the floor to defend myself and escape. All my life, I burned to break others' chains, sunder the hateful embrace of slavery, but my own depraved longing for you, I cannot subdue. I have said, love, that no man should own another, but I would be yours until the sun and moon and stars have all passed away. The second poem is an imagined letter from Samuel Gridley Howe to Charles Sumner, unsent, Boston, 1858. Perhaps it is my work among the blind, learning to see with the tips of my fingers, listening for voices to tremble and fall or crack bitter with anger, to know others when all the faces around me are closed, but I see more than you know. We live in inhuman systems, prisons and asylums, where those so disposed find only madness. The plantation, an auction block, rotten timbers in the foundation of our nation. Even our village schools, where pupils are cuffed and thrashed for stupidity and brilliance alike. In the midst of all this, what does our happiness mean, thee and me? You know me, dear Charles, a man much given to dark moods, in need of constant care, and care for others is a woman's nature. So Julia is my love as a wife. Yet I cannot help signing, as I never can help, that I am and forever shall be entirely yours. And the final poem here is an imagined letter from Julia to Samuel, unsent, Boston, 1857. And I have to say that the last two lines are hers and from her own poem, and they're just amazing. I never told you, but I heard you and Charles laughing at unmarried women and their barren lives, as if you knew what we wanted to create. I have borne one book only, and that a dangerous labor that near killed our marriage. What we saved, a buried kind of life. Scribbling poems on scraps I hide in drawers, tugged at by the book in my pocket as I write the grocer, dandle a baby, serve all and dinner, set my teeth, and brightly draw you from your regular darkness. I wrote Annie, I am trying to press all bitterness out of my heart, but I lied. Samuel, mark no steadfast path for me. I am and will myself a comet, dire and strange. I just want to close with the last poem in the book, which is called Conjunctions. Last night, Jupiter and Saturn drew so close they became one light. Above our balcony, only a ceiling of clouds. So that was once in a lifetime, the hidden miracle, only once. First breath, unfolding my sun like a poppy. Looking up from salting the path as new snow lights on trees. Weighing this book in a dry palm before you open it. It's all only once, always becoming one light.
Emma, thank you, Janan. And there are books by Emma at the back of the room. Please feel free to hang out, and I'm sure Emma will happily sign a book or two.
We're happy to chat.